Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the first ACRO resident podcast. My name is Nima Razavian. I'm a PGY4 resident over at Wake Forest, and I'm the current chair of the ACRO resident committee. Today, we're going to be talking about the radiation oncology residency interviews. We got a lot of questions submitted online from medical students out there, and so we figured we'd answer them in this podcast. So I'm going to be moderating today, and I'm joined by two of my co-moderators here. I'll have them introduce themselves. We have Alexis.
Hey everyone, I'm Alexis Schutz. I'm a PGY4 at the University of Oklahoma, and I am the vice chairman of the ACRO resident committee. Thanks for tuning in. We hope this is some good advice for interview season.
Great, thanks, Alexis. And we also have Cyrus. Cyrus, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much, Nima, for the introduction. I am Cyrus. My name is Cyrus Washington. I'm a PGY3 at the University of Miami. And I am a part of the subcommittee on the ACRO mentorship, ACRO residence committee, a part of the subcommittee of ACRO mentorship. So hopefully, after this, we finish all of this, we can talk about some of the great opportunities that we have and who can join ACRO and what ACRO is and kind of go from there. So I'm very, very happy to be here and to answer all these great questions and go forward.
Okay, great. So thanks Alexis and Cyrus for joining me today. So we have a couple of areas about the interview process that we're going to talk about. So the first area we're going to discuss is the pre-interview. So how do we get ready for interviews, and what's the process, or what's the interview process in general? So the first question we got was, when do interview invites come out?
So, interview invites will come out usually in October, November. Interviews can start anywhere from November and go all the way into interview season, late into the interview season, like January. Sometimes they're early February. I think most programs either try to do early or late, or they'll have one or two sessions where one's earlier and one's later. I know our program this year is interviewing in November, so it's a little earlier than we used to, but that's when we are.
Yeah, and I think the key is to just remember that, your friends in pediatrics, some of them get interview invites like literally the day after the application gets submitted. It might take a month or two before you get some invites, and some people can send out invites as late as January.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nima.
Also, kind of just to add to that, I know that by design, in the past, I think ASTRO was like a time, like a benchmark for when to expect interviews, and it was just like, most program directors don't even look at applications before ASTRO, and it was like things would come out, kind of expecting things to, like interview invites to come out after ASTRO. I think it's kind of still like that. What do you think, Alexis?
Yeah.
Or Nima?
Yeah, I mean, with ASTRO coming up next week, I don't think anyone's really sent out invites that I've heard of. So I would say wait till after ASTRO.
Yeah, and the dates for those on the website, or you can kind of just Google those dates. They're usually around this time period annually. So if you haven't heard anything back by this time, it's usually just because people are waiting for ASTRO to be done. And then kind of after that is when program directors usually get to things.
Okay. And another question we got was, can I contact programs prior to the interview? Like if I haven't gotten an invite yet, is it okay to reach out to a program?
So I think, I think it's as I mentioned before, that ASTRO time period, I think that's a good benchmark. And once, after that, there's some concern about, whether or not you've gotten an interview invite, then you can kind of reach out. But I definitely would wait until after whenever the annual conference is to kind of think about, okay, it's been some time now. We should start thinking about, reaching out to the program and kind of seeing where you stand there.
Yeah, and I'd be definitely selective with these. So, have your couple programs that you're super interested in and email them based on why you're interested in what interests you. So like maybe you're from a certain state, or, you know, you have family there. Those would be the ones that I would reach out to. But, you know, it's a small field. I'm sure everyone's heard that a bunch, but don't send like a broad email to everyone, because then people talk. But yeah, I mean, if there's a place that you're super interested in and you have a connection there, or you just really want to go there, sending them an email and telling them why is always a good, you know, not too big of a shot in the dark. But I would email either the program director or the program coordinator. Don't email the chairman. It would be more program director, program coordinator.
I was wondering that too. If it's a situation where you would email the program director directly, or versus the program coordinator. But
Yeah,
I see that you're going straight for the big guns.
So I've done this before when I applied, and I usually would do the program coordinator, but sometimes like in ARIS, from what I remember, they don't always list the program coordinator, or you can't find it on the website. So then if I couldn't do that, then I would reach out to the program director, but I kind of kept that as like a last resort.
That's what I was going to say. Like for small little, and maybe we should kind of describe, I mean, I don't know if a med student I knew. So the program coordinator is like more of secretarial work. They're like handling, scheduling everything. And so that should be like your go-to contact for like interview dates, small questions, like any, you know, anything that you need to talk about scheduling interviews. But the program director is actually a physician, and they're in charge of the residency program. So that's going to be someone that you only contact, like kind of like Nima said, saving that as a last resort, because they're super busy. You're probably going to get a response from the program coordinator way faster than you would from the program director.
Okay.
Yeah,
so how
I
many
totally agree with that.
interviews? So how many interviews should people go on? I think this is for every med student, like a real big source of anxiety is, you know, you sent out all your interview invites, the interviews start rolling in, and now you have to decide, well, how many interviews should I actually participate in?
That's a good question. I think throughout the entire process, being genuine to yourself is the part that I think that will kind of take you pretty far in the process. And when I say being genuine to yourself, I mean, you know, if you apply to, you know, whatever programs you apply to, if you actually can't see yourself there as a resident, then I wouldn't recommend interviewing there, because there's another person who might love that place and might love that city, and you are kind of just, you might be taking up a spot for that person during the interview day. If it's something that you're just like, oh, I'm just doing this to have the numbers, versus actually, I can actually see myself living here. I like the program. I'm genuinely interested in what the program has to say. So I think you can kind of feel it out for yourself. You know, definitely just think about if this is a place that you would want to practice in the future. And then with that being said, I don't really know if there's a cap to numbers.
That's a great answer, Cyrus. I always say, like, you have to be genuine, and you have to know that everyone's different in this process, and everyone is going to have different priorities for their program. So, you know, never compare yourself to the other people. And it's a really hard thing to do. You're going to kind of get caught in the motions of trying to compare yourselves to others and asking, you know, who's interviewing where and what they're doing, but really just trying to stay true to yourself, and knowing, you know, what your interests are and what your goals are.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and also it's sorry.
No worries. I was going to say, for people who are more data driven, because there are those people who are like, what are the numbers? What are the numbers? So if you look at like the old, so this is old data. I don't have like the most recent charting outcomes in the match in front of me. But if you look at the old data, it was kind of like once you got to 8 interviews, you had a 90% chance of matching. Once you got to 12 interviews, you had a 95% matching. And then once you were going more than 15, you really had diminishing returns in terms of the percentage chance of you matching. And that's assuming that you actually ranked all those interviews. So this isn't going on 15 and then only ranking 3. This is like going on 15 and ranking all 15. And, you know, granted, this is older data. So I think, you know, given where the field is now, you probably need fewer than what this data suggests. But that gives you a general ballpark of, you know, what are the likelihoods of matching based on the number of interviews you've attended. Okay, so then last question for this section. So how should people deal with conflicting interview dates? Let's say you get your interview from program X, it's on, the second Friday of December, but then program Y comes in and this is the program you really want to be at, but the only day they have is that same date as program X. What should you do?
So I would recommend kind of having a calendar, a big monthly calendar, and trying to place all your interview dates on there as you get them, because it's going to be confusing and you're going to get, your dates confused. There's always the pre-interview dinner and then the interview day. So trying to stay as organized as possible will definitely help you moving forward. But if there is, and there will be, a time when the interview dates overlap, that's when I would email the program coordinator. So kind of like what we chatted about earlier, not the program director. These are the small questions that you would email the program coordinator about, and ask if there's, any other dates offered, because most programs will have 2 interview dates. And then, if it's possible that you could switch dates, or be put on like a wait list, sometimes that's an option. I would definitely, if you're going to email them and change your date, then stick with the date you changed to. Don't change back. Like if you are making this decision, go ahead and stay with it. And then make sure you're giving like plenty of time. There's nothing like someone, canceling or rescheduling the day before. That's a super tough look. So, being organized, if there is a conflict, addressing it the second that you can, and then sticking with whatever you decided to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And a lot of times programs, or from what I've seen, they might actually add an interview date sometimes, where it's like originally they only had like 2 dates. And then because of like conflict, they realized that their program actually in kind of conflicts with another program. Then sometimes they might actually add an interview date. And so in that situation, or just in general, like I said, just be genuine to yourself. Which is the program that you really can see yourself at? Which is the program that you really want to go to? And then kind of prioritize based on that. And then kindly, and like Alexa said, giving the other program enough time to, reschedule another applicant if they need to, if you can't go. But also, stating that, you still have interest in a program, if you can be placed on the wait list. And if you'd be very happy to interview if you have an extra interview date that opens up. So just being very transparent, we're all people. They get it, there's a very stressful time for the applicants. And so they're very accommodating usually, and they want this to work out for everyone. So it's usually in the best interest of everyone, for everyone to kind of be accommodating and thinking about pretty much not just themselves, but everyone as a whole.
Okay, so moving on. So the next section we'll talk about some general tips about preparing for the interviews. So one of the first questions we got in this section was, what should I know prior to an interview? What do I need to know going into my interviews with these programs?
So number one thing for sure is, and I'm sure everyone's heard it, but it still is very impressive that people that don't know your application. So if you are going to put something, and you've probably already submitted your UMass, so it's already done. So go back and look at your application, look at every single word you put on there. Programs, will find the smallest research project and ask what you did or what your role was in it. And it's so embarrassing and, mortifying if you don't know. So whatever you put on there, whatever you submitted, go make sure you're all aware and know all the things that you can talk about it.
I completely agree. I mean, I think at this stage in application, a lot of times applications tend to look alike, as well as the resume, the CVs, everyone has research experience. Everyone, I don't want to say it's cookie cutter, but like we kind of all blend at some point, right? And there's usually little intricacies that set us apart from each other. So it's very, very important to know your application very, very well, whether it's the type of research you've done, whether, if you play, for example, my mentor, we met up at Astra a few years, I think that was 2019. Yeah, we met up at Astra 2019. And on my resume, it says that, I play the trumpet and I've been playing for a long time. And so he was like, oh, like the first thing that he said to me was, well, who's your favorite trumpet player? And what key do you play in? And what type of genre of music do you? It was like a whole bunch of a slew of questions about jazz, symphonic, classical music that I was able to answer because I genuinely, this is something that I've been doing for a very long time. So it was very organic for me to talk about the trumpet and the type of music that I like. But if I played the trumpet one time and I wasn't being genuine and kind of just put that on there to kind of set myself apart, that would have been a really embarrassing moment for me because it's like, oh, so you don't really play the trumpet that much and you don't really have all this like experience. And so if that's something that you are not honest about in your application, like what else, right? Like you don't want people to kind of have those kind of that type of bad taste in their mouth about like, oh yeah, actually a question on your CV about your CV and you couldn't really talk about it. So like where do we really go from here?
Yeah.
So like Alexa said, like it can be super embarrassing. But if
And
yeah.
remember that like this is your first impression and first impressions are key. So if you're if you're distrustful and your application's wishy-washy off one question they ask you, like it's not a good look. So I would, I had kind of the same thing, Cyrus. I like to garden and one person was like, so what'd you grow this year? And I was like, oh, okay. We're going to talk about my tomatoes and my peppers. And, some of the questions that you get won't be just about, med school and research. They're really just trying to get to know you as a person. And so some people would rather talk about your hobbies and that's totally okay, but just, actually be interested in them.
Yeah, I think just to highlight what the importance of what Cyrus and Alexis are saying is that section in your ARIS application where you talk about your interests is actually more important than a lot of people think. They just think like, oh, I'm just going to put something here. But when you actually look at like what questions you get asked, like that's the one section that most people look at and a lot of people will ask about. So being able to describe your interests, I think is actually going to be really important for you. Okay, so moving on. So you know your application by heart, okay. Something people have wondered though, going into the interviews, should I look up these faculty ahead of time? Should I look up like what research is available in the department? Like how useful is that?
I think that if you are a person that has a specific institution in mind and a specific person that you're like, wow, like I love this person's research, then I think it might be extremely useful to show that you've done the research and that you've done the extra efforts to really get to know what this person is doing. Other than that, I don't think it will be helpful to talk about, because if you think about it, you're going to be, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Like you have like 15 to 20 interviews on the interview day. And it's like, it'll be too much for you to try to like learn every single person. I think it's better that you kind of know your application well and know exactly like your CV and all of that, as we mentioned before. But to know like the nitty gritty research of a person who you're going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes with, I don't think it's extremely useful. Alexis, you might have a different perspective on this, but I just feel like as long as you know your CV well, and like I said, if there is one specific person that you're just like, I want to come to this institution and I want to work with this person, then that's a person that should really kind of like unpack their research, know a lot about it, just to show that you're genuine people. Their interest and their research generally pique your interest. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would just one person or maybe two if you have an interest that aligns, but you have to remember these interviews are about you. And so like, it'd be kind of odd to turn the interview on someone else, they really are trying to get to know you. I would say it's important to know about the program. So when they ask you, do you have any questions? That's when you can pull out, that you've looked up the program and you're familiar with what they have, and you can use your knowledge that you've learned from that to ask intelligent and, inquisitive questions. But I wouldn't look up every faculty, and you're going to be exhausted by the end of that and you'll burn out super quickly.
Okay, so one of the questions from our Twitter community was, what is the ideal background for an online interview? All
right, I will take this. I think Zoom is really unique, and it's a great way for us to interview and not have to fly, and we can save a lot of money, which is super important as medical students. But you have to be professional in your Zoom as well. So make sure you have a suit on, make sure that you have, I would say, like a neutral background. So don't do like the virtual background that's something crazy. I mean, it can be a conversation starter if you have like a unique background that's a picture you've taken, but something professional, I would say neutral. Make sure that you look nice, you're sitting up, you're not slouching, you're not on your phone. I mean, Zoom etiquette is such a big thing because you should be pretending like you are in their office talking to them. And also, just speak like you're there too. I think there's a lot of like being casual when you're at home in your own space on your own computer, like just try to pretend like you're there in front of them. I don't know, Nima, any other advice?
Yeah, I definitely agree. This kind of moves into our next section about like during the interview, but the neutral background, I think, is definitely a thing to have. You want to avoid, I know Zoom has all these fancy things, there's like a beach or a volcano, like just avoid that. If you have a background that it's like, I've seen applicants where, behind them is like, some art that they painted or the instrument that they play or something like that. Like those things are, if those are naturally in your background, then those could be conversation starters. But, otherwise, a blank wall or like one of those backgrounds where the background is kind of like faded out, that would also work. And I agree in terms of like, how to conduct yourself, during the interview. This is still a professional interview, even though you might be doing it from home, right? Still dress professionally, respond to things respectfully, that kind of stuff.
And try to like minimize distraction. So like if you have a dog or you have family, put them away, but like people understand that things happen, but I wouldn't have like a dog barking the whole time or, a baby crying or things like that. But like if one little thing happens, don't fret about it, just apologize and move on, and people are understanding, and we do Zoom for everything, I feel like nowadays. So you're comfortable with it. And so just it's fine if something happens. I'm also thinking about like Wi-Fi connectivity. If your Wi-Fi fails, then just send the coordinator an email and, say, hey, I'm logging back on. I'm so sorry I lost connection. Totally understandable. Everyone will, don't freak out about things like that.
Also, I think it's important to think about the fact that, this is about you too. Like you want to get to know the residents. You want to get to know like the people that are on the Zoom, the program that you could potentially be at. So try not, it's hard to say, try not to be shy. That's definitely a personality thing. I think I'm being shy myself, but like, really try to kind of step out of yourself and get to know the residents during the Zoom calls is super, super important.
Yeah, I agree. I think, kind of underappreciated thing is, back when we did in-person interviews, you would have a dinner usually with the residents, like the night before or like right after the interview. And you would get to, walk around the department and tour the department during the interview. With the virtual format, a lot of that is gone. And so, that those periods of the day where they give you time to speak with the residents, and it's usually in a very casual setting, like when you're between interviews, or it might be, a Zoom dinner the night before, that's like your real opportunity to learn about this program. Unless you do a second look or something, but, I really think those are important experiences to attend, because you want to get a sense of like, what are the residents like? Do they seem to be getting along with each other? Can I get a sense of like what their resident culture is? Do they hang out with each other outside of work? Are they friendly with each other? That could, really speak to what the program is like once you're actually there.
Totally
okay,
agree.
So another question we got was, who are the people that we talk to during interview day? Like, who are the kinds of people we're going to meet on the day of the interview?
I have a funny story with this one. So be expected to speak to anyone in the department. And one of my first interviews, so I'm a PGY4, so I did interviews actually in person. I won't say where I went, but my first interview was with a physicist. And I was like completely shocked. I didn't know that physicists can interview you. And he was asking me just some basic physics questions. And so don't be prepared for that. But I think he was just trying to like break the ice, but it like really threw me for a loop because I still had like 6 interviews left that day. And I started with the physicist. So be aware, it could be a nurse, it could be a physicist, it could be a resident, it could be we have our like clinic manager and our therapist interview too. So like anyone from a radiation department is fair game. They're really just all trying to get to know you. But it's not just going to be doctors. Nima, do you have any stories?
I was going to say that agree that yes, I've had physicists, radiation therapists, clinic managers, nurses, radiation biologists, like PhD scientists, and in terms of like the structure of the interviews, for the most part, interviews in RadOnc are 1-to-1. Occasionally they're like 2-to-1, or I've had a 3-to-1 before. That's 3 interviewers to 1 applicant. But overall, talking to some of these people is actually pretty interesting. My story would be that once I was talking to a physicist and they were talking about how their program helps the zoo treat animals with radiation. And so I asked them what was the most interesting animal they had to help plan radiation for. And they said it was a sloth that had bladder cancer.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So you get to hear some interesting stories like that.
Yeah,
there's still an opportunity to get to know people in the department.
Yeah, you can definitely get more of a feel of the culture too, like, talking to the different aspects of the department, and they're all people that you're going to work with on a daily basis as residents. So it's a good thing to get to know the others. I think we lost
moving on. So moving on, we're going to go over some questions that you might be asked during the interview. Again, this is a list that I made based on my own personal experience. It is by no means all encompassing, but I figured we'd go over some common questions that I had heard during the interview trail. And then Alexis and I can kind of give our thoughts on how we would respond to this question. So I think one of the most common questions you're going to be asked is, why radiation oncology? Why do you want to be a radiation oncologist?
Yeah, and
how would you start to approach that?
You just have to be genuine, really and truly, why are you choosing this? And I think everyone has a story or, some sort of, thing that changed your interest or made you interested, but just be genuine with this. And I don't know, for me, it was like, I had a patient and, I told that story, and it was an easy story to tell because it was true. And it's really what piqued my interest in the field and my passion to continue down this. So that's what I would say. I don't know, Nima, just be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I personally did not have, I think everyone tries to think of a patient experience or something like that. It doesn't have to be necessarily like that. Mine was more of a kind of process of elimination. I came in interested in oncology because I had spent, time in a research lab, and I thought that was interesting. And then I, started seeing how I could practice oncology, and then I tried my hat at everything. And then, I found radiation oncology because I really liked, the clinical aspects of it and, being able to work with patients on a day-to-day basis. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a profound, this experience changed my life kind of thing. It could just be organically, I just kind of came to this.
And you'll get into more of, a routine when you're interviewing, but it's going to be so much easier when you're honest and when you're telling things that are the truth and not trying to, hype yourself up or look more impressive. Everyone's human, not everyone has a groundbreaking story. And really that kind of changed my life forever is one in, thousands of people. So no one expects you to have that story, but just being genuine and honest will take you so much further in an interview, and it'll help lessen your nerves. And the other side of that is that the people that are interviewing you can feel that. They can feel when you're being, honest and genuine.
Yeah. And I think the important thing is really, and it is work, right? An interview day you think you're just going to be talking to a bunch of people, but it is exhausting at the end of the day, because with each interview, you want to be able to show like your excitement and your passion. And sometimes that's really hard to do when you're having to do it repetitively. Like you'll have, 6 interviews in a row and you literally get asked the same question each time, right? And so you as the medical student or the interviewee have to like communicate that enthusiasm each time. You really don't want to get to the end and be like, they're like, okay, why are you interested? And you're like, like sigh, like really loudly, clearly annoyed that you've been asked this like 10 times today.
You're probably like laughing at us, but you will feel that way very soon. And you just have to like remind yourself, I'm doing this. It's a long road, kind of give yourself a little pump up. Those last couple interviews they're tougher. I mean, you're going to just make yourself do it, make yourself be excited. And it might be the program that you end up at. So they deserve as much and more attention than the previous interviews, but it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think after the why radiation oncology question, I think the other most common question that I noticed was, we kind of hinted at this before, was like, tell me about this hobby you listed in your intersection. Like that gets talked about more frequently than people think. I think, when you initially make these, fill out the ARIS application, that intersection is just this one small box compared to like the rows and rows of extracurriculars and publications and stuff that you're adding. But the hobby section is really the best way for these faculty to get a sense of like who you are and like what you're interested in, and get a sense of like who you are as a person, and that gives them a sense of like what your fit might be in the department.
Yeah. So like I cannot say it enough times. Know what you put on your ERAS. Go right now when you're listening to this, go pull up your application, look at your hobbies and think about it. They're going to ask you if you put traveling, where's the favorite place you've been and why, if you put food, what's your favorite restaurant? So like, go now, look at it. Don't be embarrassed in your interviews.
And sometimes, one piece of advice I've heard, like if you, don't feel embarrassed about your hobby, because sometimes these like unique hobbies are ways that people remember you by. Like they might not remember your name, but they'll remember you as like girl who went parasailing with dolphins or something, bizarre like that, right? So it's like it's a way to actually for people to remember you.
Yeah, and if it's a true hobby of yours, put it down and own it. I mean, if that's something that you enjoy, then stand by it. But yeah, cool things, anything, different things. That's your way that you stand out from everyone else.
Yeah. And so another question we get commonly asked, and it's a little bit of a vague question, is tell me about yourself. One of those, there's a couple in here that are these very like open-ended questions. Or if you sit down with the faculty and they're like, tell me about yourself. What do you want me to know?
That's always a very interesting question, because you don't really know what they're asking, right? It's like, should I regurgitate my CV? You've seen my CV, you know my application. So I think being prepared for that question requires you kind of thinking about like being a bit strategic. So I would probably say like, well, outside of my CV, I'm the kind of person who enjoys, I would probably talk about some type of quirky hobby or some type of quirky food or something like that can kind of add something different to my personality that they're getting from my application. I don't think I would talk about anything that's on my CV already. Or maybe I would talk about, maybe I might like kind of give not a funny story, but a little bit more context to something that's on my CV in a very interesting story time kind of way.
Yeah, it's hard. I think I always started with like, oh, well, I was born in Colorado and then I moved to Oklahoma and then I went to college here, just like kind of a brief overview. And then they usually like interject and will ask you something more, because some people are like, tell me about yourself, just like to get you talking. And then they'll kind of lead you into where they're trying to go. Oh, well, at college, I see that you did this, or, during med school. And so they're just trying to get you chatting. But yeah, like Cyrus said, just start talking.
You will encounter people who the tell me about yourself is because they actually haven't read your application, and that's their way to try to get to know what's in your application.
Oh, that's
So I
interesting.
agree with, I think both approaches are actually really fair here. One is not better than the other. I'm more of, I would probably approach it more of Alexis, where I would start off like, oh, I was born in San Diego. I went
Yeah.
to this college, and then get into my like why radiation oncology spiel, like weave that into this question. But there's again no like wrong answer here, and as you've seen between the three of us, there's different ways that you could approach this. But again, it's really an opportunity for them to try to get to know you.
Yeah. I even might even talk about like my siblings a little bit, like, oh yeah, like I'm one of X, and being a middle child. I don't know. I would definitely come up with like a little story here. I would definitely start out like Alexis, like, oh, I'm from here, I was born here, and then I would probably talk about like my relationship with my siblings, or like something along those lines, where it's like, oh, okay, like this is somewhere we can start, and we can kind of go from. And then obviously incorporate some type of like radiation oncology, where it's like, yeah, because I'm the middle child and I felt like I got no respect. I wanted to do something great with my life, so I'm becoming a radiation oncologist or something like that.
I'm
something
also
like
a
that.
middle child, Cyrus.
See, and look at us, look at us.
Us thriving. And since Nima, touched on it, I think we should talk about how not everyone is going to read your full application, and that's okay. But use that as a time. Like if you can tell that they really don't know anything about you, then tell them about you. Like you can tell if it's just like kind of they're asking you very broad, open questions, and they're wondering, then that's fine. Not everyone has the time to look at them all, and tell them, what are your three best things on your application, and they might say that, tell me about your application. Then you just pick what you want, what you feel comfortable talking about, and tell them.
And another question that can be asked is, where do you see yourself in 10 years? So trying to get a sense of like, what are your long-term goals or your long-term interests? How would you guys approach that?
That's a hard one. I'm trying to think like back when I was interviewing. Yeah, I think I got asked like.
I think that's the way I would start is, if you have an idea of kind of like what kind of, some people do, some people don't, but if you have an idea like, oh, I think I'm interested in academic medicine, I want to be an academic attending. I wouldn't like pigeonhole yourself into a disease site just yet, but you can say like, I've had these interests in radiation oncology, and I think I would really want to be in academic medicine because I think I would really like to be an educator or something like that. And I think it's very fair. Like if your goal is like, I want to be a radiation oncologist or go to residency so I can learn how to deliver quality care and deliver it to the people in my community, that's also like a very valid, thing to want to do in 10 years. There's like no, wrong thing here.
And, life is so unpredictable. You never know, but you have goals. And I think one of mine was like, I just want to be the best physician I can be, and be able to deliver the best care to my patients, and be an advocate for my patients. So, in 10 years down the road, I hope that I'm, a great person, and my patients, feel comfortable coming to me, and that I can advocate for them. Totally normal to say too. You don't have to have, I'm going to be working here with this job and this disease site. Like life changes, but what are your goals as like almost like a human, and then try to relay those in rad-onc.
Yeah, I agree. I think I probably would say something like, honestly, I don't know. If I'm being honest.
Trying to get through today.
Yeah. I mean, first get through today, but also like I know my interests now, and I know what I know what's led me here, and I know what I have a strong interest in now, and hopefully in the future, that will come into fruition in something for like academic career, or even. But I don't know if I would talk about private practice on an interview, but I would definitely say.
I think taking what Cyrus said though, like you could say that and then use it as a way to be like, I have this interest and that interest, and I'm not exactly sure right now, but what I'm looking for is a program that will give me the opportunities to explore those interests. So you kind of like turn it back around on them.
Yeah.
Because then that's their opportunity to try to sell the program to you, right? Like you're
Yeah.
looking for a place that can give you these opportunities. So there's definitely like a way to approach it the way Cyrus did too.
Yeah. And remember, like with the field right now, like they're recruiting you, you're trying to show them who you are. And you're the best, but also they're recruiting you. So kind of spend it on them.
And so another kind of tricky question that the first time I got this, I was not prepared for this. So definitely think about this. Was why this program? Why do you want to come to X university for your training?
Yeah, that's definitely one that you have to. I know I spoke about like doing research prior to going, on the faculty. Maybe not doing research on every faculty, but with this question, you have to do your research on the institution. Like you would be doing yourself a disservice if you go to a program and don't know anything about the program. So I think whether you have geographical ties to the program, whether there's some type of like cutting edge machine that they might have, or some type of cutting edge technology or research that they're working on that's drawing you to this program. I think it's something that you should definitely be thinking about and highlighting during the interview. So any kind of geographical ties, genuine interest in whatever's happening in the department, leadership. Well, I don't know if I would go as far as like faculty and leadership, just because that can be a revolving door. I don't suggest following people, just because people,
sure.
People take positions. People take positions and change jobs and relocate themselves all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily follow people, but I would definitely follow the institutions, kind of like what they produce, what is something that is very specific to that place. And it seems to be the theme, the pervasive theme over the years.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Kind of like what we talked about before, like not needing to look up every single faculty and there's something about them, but I would say definitely look up the program. And it's hard. Some of the websites aren't great. You've got to go to Twitter, trying to figure out from residents, but find something that at least one thing that sticks out to you that you can talk about.
Yeah, and I think again, reiterating something Cyrus said, the geographic or the family reason for being in an area, I think is actually really important, and it's very
huge.
valid to address that. I think some people might be like, oh, well, that's not a strong reason, but it is actually, in some programs, that actually sells them on you a little bit more, because they know that if you have like that geographic reason, be it family, whatever, you're going to be more invested while you're there, and so hopefully be more happy and productive as a resident because you're more invested in being in that area.
Yeah,
totally.
I think it's huge. If you have even like really close family friends, or I would mention it, and it's a tie, and it's better than nothing.
I did just like a kind of like an experience that I had in one of our away rotations. The chair said to me, he said, we like people from here. We like people that have geographical ties here. And so like that's something that definitely sticks out on applications. And that was from the chair of the program. So I think just like Nima said, I think it's important. And I'm not trying to say that this is like, every program is like this, but like I think it's something very, very important to think about. And any kind of ties that you have to that region is something that you want to highlight more than one time on the application, more than one time during the interview day, I would say, to make it clear.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to some other questions, I think, another category of questions that you occasionally get are these situational questions. So these will be things like, tell me about a time where you made a mistake. Tell me about a time where you had to work in a team. Let's, have a pretend scenario where you have this patient and they have, a rectal cancer that really should be treated and they don't comply or they're refusing to comply. How would you, deal with that? And these are not questions that I think have like a right answer, but it's really for them. People who ask these questions are really trying to see how you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're tough. And I didn't get a bunch of these. I think people are kind of getting away from them. I know they want to like see how you think. I'd be prepared for a couple though. I'd be prepared for tell me a time that like something didn't go your way or didn't go as you expected. Tell me a time that you like had conflict and how you dealt with that.
Mhm.
I don't know, and just have an answer. But like Nima said, they don't care about the story. They care about how you handled it and how your resolution was. So like, or that's another thing. I think it's another question we have. Like, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? That's another one where like you should be prepared. It's gonna come. They're more looking at how you can talk about those things and how you process through something or work through something.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a default answer or like a kind of like a practice response to these kind of questions will serve you well during an interview day where you highlight the fact that I mean, for me, I didn't realize how, I feel like during medical school and, during my away rotations, like I still didn't really understand or know the intricacies of radiation oncology when it comes to like
Mhm.
how much of a team sport it is. Like one
Yep.
person cannot wipe the other hand without the other. Like you need
Yep.
every step of the way. It's a very well-oiled machine, and you really need to be good with communication, and you also need to be very team oriented, because without you, and not even just you being the MD, like without any part of that team, nothing can progress. Like the patient will literally not get treated if everyone is not working as a team. And so I think having some type of default answer where, it speaks to you being a team player, or even like you learning how important it is, being on the team, and how you like working in a team friendly environment, some type of um, kind of perspective like that, I think is always a good idea to kind of have that in your arsenal of default questions that you feel like you can kind of just give it a default answer to. So.
And so another category of questions that, again, these are kind of the minority of questions that you'll see, but these I call the oddball questions. So these are the things like, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be and why? This next one,
hate these questions. I will just say that
so,
right off.
it gets better though, because I was literally asked this one. If you could be a cereal, what kind of cereal would you be and why?
Like what? Why?
Honestly, I think this is just to frazzle us, like to just throw us in like the deep end and see how we respond to like stressful situations or environments. Because I was asked one of those where it was just like, oh, like if you were a superhero, or if you were to have a superpower, like what would it be or who would it be? And I was just like, what?
Yeah, these are ones you just can't prep for. I mean, you just have to. Okay, I can kind of talk on something here. When you're asked a question, it is totally okay to sit there and pause for a couple of seconds, gather your thoughts, think about what you want to say. And these ones for sure take a couple seconds. You don't want to like mention an animal and then be like, oh, I have no clue why I want to be an elephant. But like sit, take a second, take a deep breath. I mean, we're on Zoom, so it's even less awkward if you take a couple more seconds. You can say like your Wi-Fi glitched or something. But just breathe and then say what you're gonna say. Totally okay.
Yeah, completely. And these are not like trick questions. Like they're not assessing your this like personality, or like they're not trying to make like hard calls or judgment plays based on your response to these answers. I think it's just a way to kind of lighten the interview up a little bit and just see where you're, see, I don't know, how you think not how you think as a person, but like just to kind of lighten up the mood and see where you go into. Because it's a fun question, right? It's fun at your expense, yeah. But it's kind of like interesting to see what people say. Like, but
so Nima, what cereal were you?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I actually was really proud of this answer because I thought of it like pretty quickly, and so I was like, I impressed myself. But what I said was, if I was a cereal, the cereal that best describes me is Cocoa Puffs, and I said I might appear or look like brown and unassuming on the outside, but when you put me in the right environment, that's when I reach my full potential, or something along those lines.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing, Nima.
That's pretty
So
impressive
maybe
on the spot.
for you guys for you guys out there listening, if you've actually listened to this, why don't you tweet at us at ACRO Resident? If you could be a cereal, what cereal would it be and why? I'm curious to see what your answers would be.
I would love this thread. I am totally in for this. I could not come up with something like that. I would just be like, Fruit Loops. I don't know.
I immediately thought of honeycombs. I was like, I'm a sweet guy. Like I'm pretty nice.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I
like
really
honey,
eat
like
cereal.
Yeah. That's a good cereal too. So
that is a good
that's
cereal.
a good one.
Yeah, it is. It is really good.
Okay, so I figured we'd finish this sections on questions by going to kind of the most dreaded question, I think, is what questions do you have for me? Go hear this. This is, and I honestly, I think for most people interviewing, this is like panic sets in when you hear this, especially if this is the first question, and that will happen. There will be people who their first question is, what questions do you have for me? Or what questions do you have of me?
I think I might throw it back at them, but like, hey, like, do you, in your, 10-year, your time as a radiation oncologist, like, do you have any advice on, what, or ask them like what they feel are important qualities for a budding radiation oncologist to have, or like, what do you feel is important as a perspective going into this field, kind of thing, and kind of turn it back on them where they're like, oh wow, like, allow them to give some advice and kind of dig into that wisdom that they have, but it also kind of makes it a bit introspective where you're like, okay, like I can use this moving forward and definitely become better because of you.
And that's a question you can use at every institution. So like maybe have a question based on like the research you've done, something about their institution, but that's a great question that like, if you get asked, if you have 8 interviews in one day at one institution, and every single one of them, I promise you, every single one of them is going to ask, what questions do you have for me? You can't come up with 8 questions about the Linux or the Gamma Knife or whatever the heck they have there. It needs to, so that's a really good one to be like, what are you looking for in an applicant, or what qualities stand out to you, or, your most successful residents, what qualities did they have? Things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important to go into these type of questions, just having like a list of a couple that you can pull from. And it can be a question that you already have an answer to. Like I would not feel bad about reusing a question that was answered 2 interviews ago. Like if I'm really struggling to think of something, I'm just going to dip into that pool of questions that I've already thought of. And some examples that I had were things like, what do you like working, or like, what are things you like about working here? What are things you like to do in this area? What type of residents succeed in your program? Is there anything that you would improve about the program? If it's like a program director, are you planning any changes to the program? If it's like a chair or someone who like, maybe you guys are like vibing on research or something, you could be like, what are some challenges you see in the field of radiation oncology? That's a little more nuanced. I think, just having that list of kind of go-to questions if you get asked this, and even if you already have the answer, they're not going to know that you have that answer. So it's okay to just go ahead and re-ask it.
And you can also you can also like throw in your hobbies, so like if you love to hike, I don't know, what kind of mountains are around here? I like to hike. What kind of mountains do you have? Or, that's a way to ask a question, but also like throw something about yourself in, or if there's something that you want to address that you haven't talked about yet with that person, that's a great way to throw that in a question.
And you're gonna feel like you're repeating yourself, and that's okay. But every interview is a completely brand new slate, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna, like I said, there'll be like 10 to 15 interviews in one day. You're going to feel like a robot by the end, right? And then after you've gone on like 4 to 5 interviews, you're gonna realize that you're saying the same thing over and over again, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is totally fine, because guess what? Now you can add inflections here and there. You can change up your delivery. You can really fine tune your responses. So this way, by the time you get to those interviews, like you're eloquent, you're well spoken. You're not like stumbling and stammering over your word. Like think of the repetitiveness of all of this as a perk for you, and use it to your advantage. Like I said, every interview institution-wise and person-wise, is a new interview. So you're gonna, like I said, it's gonna feel very repetitive, but kind of, get that out of your head that, oh, I just said this and you'll be great.
And going off of what Cyrus said, right, interviewing is a skill. And so as you go through the interviews, you get better at it. And it's something that you can, hopefully tap into when you start now interviewing for jobs later in residency, right? Like the interview process isn't going away. You're going to need to interview, in your future. So just think of it also as like an opportunity to really hone in that skill. Because I don't know about, you guys, Alexis and Cyrus, but I felt like by the end of my interview process, like I felt pretty comfortable doing interviews. And I feel like at the beginning, I started very much like uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're never going to be perfectly comfortable, but the last ones are definitely way more doable than the first. I mean, you just have to, like we've talked about, be genuine, and your answers will come naturally.
And you start to enjoy the resident dinner part, or if depending on if the program you're interviewing at is virtual versus in person. Like I realized like towards the end of my interview trial, I was enjoying the resident part, like the dinner part, more than I was when I first started, just because I wasn't as worried about. I mean, I was still a little worried, but I know that I was a bit more like ready for the next day. And so like I realized that my interactions with the residents were a lot like more like comfortable, and like I don't want to say I was like chilling or anything like that, but like I was definitely more interactive and more comfortable with talking to the residents the night before towards the end of the process, just because after 10 to 15, you just like, I've done this a million times already, like let's go, like what do you got, like what's next, kind of thing. So
I don't know about y'all's programs, but at mine, the residents really don't have a say in the rank list. And so we're kind of an open book for the applicants. And we tell them that like, hey, ask us anything. We're going to be honest with you. The residents are a great source to find out more about the program. Like culture wise, you can ask them anything. And try it's unfortunate that it's, virtual, because that's the time that I really liked, was getting to know the residents and seeing, hey, are these people that I can hang out with every single day for the next 4 years? Because 4 years is a long time. And that's huge. I mean, really get to know them. Don't just like, slide past that.
Yeah,
completely agree.
I think to wrap up the podcast, the last section we'll talk about is some questions we got about what to do after the interview. Yeah, go ahead.
Nima, just one quick thing. I think it might be a good idea also if you can maybe interview at your home institution first. But like if you've had a sub-I there, or like hopefully your home institution, or at least have been in like contact with them, maybe they can give you some type of like mock interview, or maybe some opportunity to give you a little bit of advice as to like what to expect during these interviews. Because when I was talking to my friends that were interviewing in a whole bunch of like in peds and internal medicine, their interviews were completely different from radiation oncology interviews. Like they were like, oh yeah, we just met with 2 people and that was it. And I was like, what? Like I'm speaking to 15 people a day. Like it's just something that you're not expecting, you're not really ready for in the beginning. So maybe if your home program can kind of give you some information and some advice prior to you going to interviews, that might be a good idea. Kind of talk to them and see if that's something that they offer.
Yeah, like if you have a mentor at your program, or just a mentor in the field, definitely ask them like what their advice is going into the interviews.
Yeah. I think we were talking about doing mock interviews too. That would be helpful. Maybe we do that next year.
Yeah. Because I don't think any other field does it like we do. It's like, it's a marathon. It's like
it is
musical rooms, right? Like
musical room with physicists.
Physicists, symmetrists. Like you're gonna meet so many different people, and the schedule's gonna look like a staggered. You're gonna be like, I have to do all of this today. Like, it's all for me. So it's just something that you're not prepared for. But yeah.
So the last section we'll talk about is kind of post-interview. Okay, so you've gone on the interviews. Are you, or should you, or are you able to communicate with programs after the interview is completed?
So I know that there's like a rule that there's no post-interview communication that's supposed to happen,
Correct.
right?
I think that's
And
ACGME policy. Like,
yeah. However, I am going to be honest because I like being honest. I sent a love letter because I wanted to send a love letter. And
Yeah.
the love letter is kind of, if you don't know what that is, it's like you saying, hey, like I really enjoyed my time with you. I really enjoyed my interview at your institution. This is what I liked about it. These were the strong, what I felt was strong about your program. This is why I'm still interested. And now this last line, like I said, I put what was not my number one because I was being honest. And a lot of other people may not have done that or agree with that, but I did it. And so some people put, I'm ranking you high, I'm ranking you whatever. Um, don't send it to don't send it to more than one institution is what I'll say. But I will say, I think it's okay to send at least to send a love letter to your institution that you're really considering.
who did you send that to, Cyrus?
Whoa.
No, not the institution. Sorry. Like, gosh, did you send it to like the PD coordinator, or did you send it to every person you talked to?
That's a really good question. I sent it to the PD and the APD.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say, like, if there's a program that you really connect with and like, you're like, wow, this is the one for me, or this is top 2, or, this came out of the woods and it really surprised me, but I could see myself here, sending an email to the PD, 100% acceptable. I would not send an email to every person that you talk to that day. I would not send a generic email to every program you interview at. And I would, like, if you're going to send the email, do it right. Send it within like 2 days of interviewing, that it's genuine. This is, don't wait 2 weeks, then that's like, what, who is this person again?
Right.
Like, if you're going to do it right, and do it for the ones that really matter to you. You're taking kind of a shot in the dark. Do it for the ones that are, and don't send the same email, because then people, like we said, it's super small field. Unfortunately, people talk, people know. But yeah, and then there's like the other conversation, and I think we're going to do a podcast about this too, of like ranking your rank list, and like, if you send emails then too. But also on the note of emailing programs, don't be alarmed or like feel bad if they don't email you back, because some programs, per ACG policy, they can't email you back. So you reaching out to them is your choice, but don't feel bad or like freak out if they haven't emailed you back, because they might just be trying to follow policy.
Exactly. And I think that's the important piece there is, the policy is, no post-interview communication. It's mostly on the program's end, because it's supposed to combat programs going to applicants and gaming the match system. But you're always able to reach out to a program, like Cyrus and Alexis said, but definitely follow their policy though, because some programs I've seen this where they're very specific, like do not contact us.
Yeah.
Right. If they tell you do not contact us, do not contact them. You are basically disobeying what they told you, which is not a good look.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Follow directions.
I feel like back in the day, Nima, when we applied, 4 years ago, it was like a thing to like handwrite letters. And I feel like that is like not a thing anymore.
I did none of that. So I was one of those people that I did zero post-interview communication.
Yeah. Well, I guess I did mine like at my OAs. Like I like handwrote letters to the PD when I was.
That's so nice. That's so sweet.
Old school, I guess. But I didn't email after interviews.
I think one final question to kind of wrap the podcast up. Someone on Twitter asked us, what's something you wish you'd known about the interview process?
Go first, Nima.
I guess for me, there's a lot of anxiety kind of wrapped up in interviewing, because you're like, it's my future. I need to match with a really good program. I need this, I need that. At the end of the day, I think looking back, I would advise myself to really just trust the process. Don't be as anxious, or anxiety ridden about it. You're going to end up at a program that's a great fit for you. I think especially in the current radiation oncology climate, the applicant is very much at the advantage. So I think, nowadays you're going to really end up at a place that's going to fit you well. And so, I would just kind of trust the process, really kind of be in that moment of interviewing. It's a time unlike any other time you're probably going to experience again. And just try to go with the flow as much as you can.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Excellent.
I would say, oh, sorry, Cyrus, go ahead.
No, you.
Okay. I would say just, be true to yourself. I kind of came up with I did pros and cons for every interview place as well, and really just thinking introspectively of who I am, what I want, what kind of doctor I want to be, what are my goals in this profession, and really, like I said earlier, not trying to compare yourself to others. It's not about how many interviews you go on. It's not about if you interview at, the top places. It's where am I going to fit in? Residency's tough. It's 4 years, rad onc wise, 5 years total, but it is hard and it is stressful, and you are going to need support, and you're going to need to be in a place where you feel supported and you have, a great group of people around you. So go somewhere where your ideals and your goals match up with them, and don't worry about what everyone else is doing. I mean, don't even look at SDN. I hate to even freaking mention it, but don't look at that. Don't worry about everything else. Just focus on you. And I think, for me, making a pro and con list of what I wanted, and did that program meet those certain goals? Did, that was it for me.
Yeah, I completely just trust the process. Whatever that gut feeling that you have during interviews and interactions, go with it. I'm gonna kind of big up my program a little bit. My program director called me maybe a couple of days after ACRO, I think it was, to personally invite me for an interview. And when she called me, I was just like, is this really you? Are you really on my phone right now? And she was like, I love the application. I want to talk to you. And for me, and it was tough too, because it was just I had an interview all the way at the end of January. And I was just like, that's so far away. And there was so many interviews before that. And I was just like, I'm not sure if this is going to work out for me. It's so far where you get tired along the process, along the trail. And I was just like, no, I'm going. She called me. We had a great conversation. She cares. And it seems let's see how she cares, if the residents feel the same way. And let's see what the whole feel is. And honestly, it was the best thing ever. So kind of bottom line, trust the process and trust yourself. And you are going to end up exactly where you want and need to be.
What a good
ending. Yep, with those strong and insightful words by Cyrus, I want to thank all you guys out there who have been listening to this podcast. I know it was a little long, but I hope there was a lot of good advice here for you. I'd like to thank Alexis and Cyrus for joining me today. All three of us are part of the ACRO resident committee that we do this podcast for. And, the ACRO, just to plug ACRO, the ACRO resident committee is really here to help medical students and to help residents kind of take their next step and build their career in radiation oncology. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, you can visit our website, acro.org, or you can find us on both Instagram and Twitter at ACRO Resident. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this podcast, please feel free to shout out on social media or DM us. But again, thanks for listening to this podcast, and thanks for Alexis and Cyrus for joining me.
Yeah. And don't forget about the ACRO 2023 conference. It's going to be in Orlando in March, and we have specific programming for medical students and residents. So we have a lot of med students that come. If you guys are able to sign up, we'd love to meet you there and kind of, get the radiation oncology ball rolling. So looking forward to that.
Yes, definitely. And just another plug for the ACRO Mentor community, ACRO Mentor program. Be on the lookout for more tweets. The application is still open. There is really no deadline. We're just really invested in making sure we make these connections between the mentees and mentors. So be on the lookout for our tweets. Hope we're looking forward to seeing you at Astro, and then obviously in the future at the ACRO meeting next year. So
More to
bye,
come.
everyone.
Bye.
bye.